Thank you. Thanks for coming out tonight on this beautiful, beautiful evening. We're so excited to kick off our second ever community conversation here at SYPartners in partnership with She Says. Thank you. So SYPartners, thanks, Junius. SYPartners is a transformation consultant. So we work with individuals and their leadership teams and also companies and are starting to work a bit on the societal level in moments of grave change and transition. So I'm super excited to introduce one of our very visionary leaders here this evening, Jessica Tillyer. She's a managing creative director on our design team. And she's pulled together an amazing panel in partnership with She Says of women who have designed the types of futures that they want to see for themselves. So we're going to start off with a little exercise and then go into a panel, and we'll have some more wine, but it should be really, really fun. Here's Jess.
Hello. Thank you all so much for coming. We're so happy to have so many amazing women at SYPartners. And a shout out to the token men that are here. I see you. Represent. Nice. So I would love to just first off welcome you to SYPartners, tell you just very briefly a little bit about what we do. And then we're going to really focus for the rest of the evening on you and designing your future. And we're going to hear from a few women that are in the midst of continuing to design their own future. So SYPartners, we call ourselves a transformation company. We are, at our heart, a group of tireless optimists that believe in creating real change in the world, in businesses and in society. We work with business leaders. We work with social impact organizations, and we work with individuals to transform organizations, society, and people. And so at the heart of everything we do, we really believe in this idea of a future that does not yet exist, and bravely imagining what that future can be. It's work that requires a real sense of ambition, of fearlessness, of comfort with ambiguity, with comfort with the unknown, which is all things that probably many of us have personally experienced in our lives. And we bring to our work and to our relationships every day. So I'm often at these type of events, and there's somebody up on stage that's talking about what they do, showing lots of work examples. I'm not really that type of person. I'm not interested in doing that. What I'm most interested in is helping others apply some of what we've learned at SYPartners to your own lives. I remember, how many people are there here perhaps recently out of school? Okay, Helen. Oh. How many people are maybe 5 years into their career? Okay, so a good amount of the room. How many people are 10 years into their career? Okay, so it's a range. Here's one really interesting fact. A 10-year-old today, think of a 10-year-old you know. A 10-year-old today has a 50% chance in the US of living to be over 100 years old. That applies to our lives too. So this idea of we go to school, and then we're in this one long career, and along that journey, we get married and maybe have children. That all is about to go away. So the idea of designing our future is no longer something that is just about what happens when we get right out of school. It's about something that we're going to continue to be doing again and again and again. The act of constant reinvention. what I'm super excited about is the women that are going to talk later. They are super reinventors, and they've really figured out how to do that. But before we go there, let's start with you. We're going to do a brief workshop. So we have these, oh, that would be great, yeah. So everybody's going to get this little manifesto, a manifesto about you and about figuring out in this moment what is the change you want to see in the world and how can you be a part of that. And at SYPartners, something we really believe is to get clear about the change we want to see in the world, we first have to get clear about what it is that we bring to the table. So what is our innate ability? What is our superpower? So everybody's going to get these superpower cards. We're going to start with doing that. And let me just briefly explain. And these everything that you're getting is to keep. So, yay, enjoy it. So the superpower cards have two sides. There's a white side, and there's a colorful side. Start with the white side. And what you're going to do is go through, quietly just start to read. And as you go through, look at the cards 2 by 2. So, here's the first two. Out of those two, choose the one that feels most true to you and then move on to the next one. And then move on to the next one. And eventually, you'll be left with 1 or 2 cards. And those will be your superpowers. And you might have a better sense than these cards can tell you of what your superpower cards are. And we'll get into that. But first, let's start with that. And then we're going to do this, the manifesto together.
Does anyone need a Okay, it looks like people are getting close. Maybe another minute. Another minute. Okay, can we have the music down just slightly? It's fun, it's tribal. So I've done this for myself several times. I'm a huge believer in envisioning and in writing down and getting clear on paper about what it is you want and putting it somewhere where you can see it. I tell this to my design team. I take goals very, very seriously. I have my goals that I've set for myself in a place where I can see them every day. And
and I constantly check in on them. And I find it to be super helpful. I'm sure many of you do that as well. So this is just a beginning. This is a prototype. What I think will be so helpful in this is if before you leave this evening, even if it wasn't someone you were sitting with, finding someone in the room and writing down their name and email and just saying, keep me honest with this. I have someone in my life that I actually don't know that well. We met years ago. We never see each other anymore, but we keep each other honest in terms of how are you doing with that thing? And it's been so helpful. Would anybody like to share any part of this or any learnings from this or any questions or anything really?
Oh, you have a mic. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Megan, friend of Carolyn. This is amazing to be in a room with so many intelligent women, and I feel like we especially don't take the time normally to reflect. So this is whoever came up with this is a very potent and direct evaluation of things we don't normally think about. And it's always, I believe in the power of the word. So it's great to have something down on paper and be able to look at it and know what direction it's.
There's another comment here.
I think it feels very committed. If you're writing it down, you're committing to it. Yeah. Kind of have no choice.
Right. The idea of writing something down and committing to it and not feeling like you have a choice, you just have to step up into the full self that you can be. And your mom knows you can be. Yes.
What I found really kind of profound about the experience, by day I'm a associate creative director / copywriter. I do marketing copywriting, but I also do creative nonfiction. And I realized in doing the what impact will you have, I realized that was kind of like the coaxes of what I do by day and what I do by night. They were commingling, and I hadn't thought about it like that. That what my message was, what my target is in writing those essays that I love to do, were really on the same platform of delivering information that empowers people. And I hadn't thought about it like that. I was really thinking about all these little words I was circling here. That was like really profound. So thank you.
That's great. I did this exercise myself last night. And I was circling, I realized there was things I deeply cared about, but that I didn't actually want to lead. I didn't really want to be a part of. Maybe I wanted to donate money to it. Maybe I wanted to show up for a march around it, but it wasn't actually the thing that I think I was put here to do. So I think what's helpful about this is also getting clear about the things that you feel like you should care about, but maybe aren't for you, and accepting that. Anyone else like to share? Okay, yes.
I love here what it says in the what modes will you be in, and I literally want to put that in my business card. It's like creating worlds. It's just as simple as that. Like, it could be like digital worlds or physical worlds. It's just like creating the idea of like worlds for just people to experience.
That's great.
I was going to say, as a positive psychology practitioner and a life coach, I think this is fabulous because it breaks down exactly what you need to be looking at to take you through the steps to reach your goals, and looking at your strengths, which is an important aspect of you as a full human being, and focusing on where those strengths can take you. So kudos to this project and what you're doing. I think it's fabulous.
That's great. Okay, a positive psychologist is on our side, so we're doing something right. Yeah, I think that spirit is needed so much more in the workplace. We kind of separate ourselves, our full selves, from our work sometimes. And what we really believe in at SYPartners is actually showing up with your full self, bringing all of that, the ugly stuff too, into work. And that's when we can really thrive. Okay, so we'll continue this conversation over drinks. I'm going to give out my card too. I meant to mention earlier, we're always hiring. So if anybody is interested, I'll give you my card and let's start a conversation. And there's other people here from SYPartners. Shout out Tom Martin in the back corner, the guy. So there is some women that I would love to introduce and to come up and to hear their stories about where they are in designing their futures and where they've been in designing their past futures. So would you ladies mind coming up? Great. And would you mind all just turning to a 45-degree angle? I'm going to be up and down because as as a very pregnant woman, chairs are less and less comfortable. So what I would love to do is first begin by introducing each of you. So that you don't have to introduce yourselves. We've done some research and we'd love, yes, exactly. And then we have some questions, and then we'd love to quickly open it up to questions from the audience and really just to have a conversation about where we all are. So I'm so pleased to start by introducing Barbara. Barbara Pentuso is a principal at SYPartners. And she is at the intersection of business, strategy, creative thinking, product design. She spent her career building business both as an entrepreneur and a consultant. She founded Hey Neighbor, with the explanation point at the end, a social network startup that earned her the title of Startup Idol of Fortune magazine. She's built 2 digital agencies. She was the VP of strategy at Huge. She's led large-scale efforts with ARP, Target, Comcast, Gucci. She led innovation programs at Frog Design. And going way back, she started her career as a pastry chef, a restaurant manager, and graduated from hotel school at Cornell University. And she's also cultivated a career of travel, which I want to know how to do that, taking sabbaticals between jobs whenever she can. So let's pay attention to Barbara. Barbara, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then I'd like to introduce, my cards aren't in order, but Farrah at the very end. Farrah Bostic is a Brooklyn-based, Oregon-bred digital strategist. She has expertise in the lean, agile approaches to strategy, design, social trends, and mobile utility. She's an advocate for learning, applying lean manufacturing and agile development principles to brand strategy and creative development. She's immersed herself in design thinking approaches to developing interactive experiences, which we need more women in. That's fabulous. The founder of The Difference Engine, a responsive strategy and design consulting. Farrah works with design agencies, startups, established brands, to develop customer engagement and acquisition strategies. She's also worked with Whiting Kennedy, TBWA, Shite Day, Mad Dogs and Englishmen. She's a brand strategist and an innovation lead for communications and brand consultants like Hall and Partners. So thank you so much for being here. Next we have Sally, Lady in White, who is the founder of the Group Project, a team and collaboration design company. Several years at Google got her interested in how algorithms can build and reinterpret data to change how we live, and she's now focused on using data to change the way people and companies fit together, to transcend bias and create better jobs. She loves thinking about disciplines and making weird ideas feasible. Recently, she led product and operations at Buster, Before Buster, she was on the founding team of Google's News Lab. Thank you so much, Sally, for being here. And last we have Carolyn Centeno, a lover of all things interdisciplinary, a trained architect, turned innovator, turned business advocate. She has a master's degree in architecture, began her career in interior and experiential design, founded a startup about local food, built the US presence of Dungeon Rogue. I don't even know
Dragon
that.
Rouge.
Oh, sorry.
But Dungeon Rogue sounds really interesting.
I'm dyslexic. I was thinking of Dungeons and Dragons. It's a creative mind. Built key client relationships at INEO, defined brand strategy at Puma, developed new relationships in North America for Wolf Ollens. And she brings an innovative perspective to business and looks to design relationships for empathy and business needs, brand needs, and user needs. Another global nomad and a creative. While she's not traveling, she leads sound meditations and loves to redesign her apartment. Welcome. Welcome to our panel. Thank you. And a huge thank you to Allie for bringing this fabulous group of women together. And to Aki, who is our managing creative director in our San Francisco office, for bringing Allie to us. See, this is why that circle thing at the end is so important. It's like, who's in that network? So what I would love to first hear about is you obviously are all women, constantly designing your future, redesigning your life. How would you describe that, maybe in 5 words?
Every day really fucking challenging. A natural part of life.
Everyone's just making it up.
I'm going to cheat. I'm a career improv master.
I love that. So where are you in your designing future moment now? Where are you? Like, are you in a reinvention phase? Are you in a everything feels kind of settled phase? Yeah.
I'm in a reinvention phase. So I just started at SYPartners about a year ago. And I'm totally in new territory here. I'm doing organizational transformation, which I've never done before, but it does draw on a lot of my past experiences.
Yeah, I'm in a reinvention phase as well. I a year and a half ago started Formand with 2 guys, Manny and Jim. They're both very talented designers, so it's been a really fabulous experience just trying to, coming from other agencies and trying to figure out what this startup is all about. I also just got certified as a sound practitioner to lead sound meditations, so I'm trying to create different amounts of balance in terms of wellness and creativity in my life, and it's fascinating. It's another reinvention phase. So.
I'm also doing, it's hard to answer that because I feel like I'm in a perpetual reinvention phase.
Yeah.
But right now I'm trying to realize something that is a little bit of a culmination of things that have not quite fit in all the previous things that I've done. So I'm hopeful that what I'm trying to build now, the company that I'm starting, I won't be able to inception this one as much as I have previously and go even deeper into a different field. I would love to struggle to reinvent harder than I am right now.
I think reinvention is still the right word, but it also is a little bit of rejection, which is to say that there are a lot of things that I've been thinking about and doing and practicing over the last 7 years that I'm starting to see the weaknesses in and really reappraise and think about again and start to think, what of that do I want to discard and what of that do I want to keep and what do I really think about some of those ideas. So that's kind of what's guiding me towards my next reinvention, I think.
So I'm sure that we've all felt this way. There's moments where I'm at a steady pace. It's like when you are doing something that feels very natural. You're at a steady pace, everything is kind of gliding along, and then there's moments where you feel quite stuck, and you're not quite sure how to get unstuck and how to design the next sort of future version of yourself. How do you all have done so many things and have lived so many different careers and different lives. How do you get out of that unstuck moment? Or how do you get out of that stuck moment? How do you unstick yourself?
Do you want to keep going down the line?
I mean, whoever would like to start.
I can shake it up for this one if you'd like. For me, the thing that I have to break out of to unstick myself is whenever you get to one of those jammed up places, you're probably holding on to something that's holding you back, and it's no longer helpful, but you have to be willing to admit that whatever that thing is kind of a waste at this point. So you have to accept the loss of a piece of yourself that maybe previously you valued or someone else valued. So part of the unsticking is vulnerability, where you're like looking for which thing to reject and drop, and creating like a gap where you can then grow something new. And the thing that usually helps me do that is talking to someone who's really trusted and I can be vulnerable with, so that they can mirror back to me, when you talk about this piece of your life, you don't seem happy, or this piece isn't feeding you in the way that it used to.
Yeah, I would add to that, and I think I totally agree. I think like self-inquisition is so critical, and being really honest with yourself in terms of like limiting beliefs that you have, but also remembering who you are. Because I think that we all have a lot of strengths and have a lot to offer the world, but sometimes we like lose that in, perhaps like someone's comments or outside forces. And so my tools are, like journaling or meditating or just giving myself enough space to think and be, and just like remembering, like even as silly as it sounds, like writing what makes you you, like what do you love to do, what gives you joy, and going towards that, and sort of trust in yourself, in the fact that it will all work out eventually, because it's been proven to me many times. Whenever I feel like shaken, I always have to kind of go back to my core of who I am.
That's interesting. I do that in two ways. One is I go back to the core of who I am by actually getting totally outside of my comfort zone. I usually if I can, take the moment and I go traveling. And many times, as you read in my bio, I've gone backpacking solo and stripped myself away of all things that I know that are familiar. And in doing that, I sort of find that quiet and figure out who I am and what I want and what is my heart and gut telling me in that time. So I kind of get this external force that helps me get unstuck. That's one way. And another way is that I just try things. I just jump in. So instead of like debating, should I take that job? Should I do this? I have a friend who has this great saying, and she says, you can do anything for a year and a day. And if you think about that, I think we tend to be stuck because we feel like these decisions are going to be forever. You just like add so much weight onto them. And so I always remember her advice of a year and a day. I can do anything for a year and a day.
Yeah, I think there's a fair amount of external processing that I do as an ADHD adult. So it's a lot of talking. And then when I realized that my husband has started to tune me out because he's heard me say it 12 times, that I must really care about that thing. But there are also times where I go back go back through journals and notebooks and start to realize I have literally been thinking about that for 5 years. Okay, it's time to do something about that. The next step for me, and this is a way in which I think I take after my my grandfather, who everywhere we went, he had a friend. Meet my friend Dave. He's the guy who takes the cart back into the grocery store. Like he just made friends everywhere he went. And that sort of throw up a flare, call anyone you know who might even be tangentially related to the thing that you're interested in, and ask them what they know and if they can introduce you to somebody else. That's literally been this week for me. There's like a whole space of research that I know nothing about, and I just started asking friends, do you know anybody who did this? Do you know anybody who works in this space? Can you introduce me to them? And yesterday I had an amazing, hour and a half long conversation with total strangers who are basically willing to stand on one foot and recite the Torah for me, which was pretty impressive and incredibly generous of their time. So that's always where I begin, is throwing up a flare and asking strangers for help.
I love the themes and what you're saying of getting out of your comfort zone, and the idea of leaving something behind, maybe either physically because you just have a small bag, or mentally saying, this is who I was, but I'm going to actually leave that here and move on to something new. Yeah. It's really beautiful. Barbara, and I love your idea of you can do something for a year and a day, especially if we're all going to be living to be 110. We have plenty of years.
You do 100 things.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm curious to hear, sometimes, I'm such a believer in following instincts, but sometimes your instincts lead you to what might be the wrong place, or you just get into something after maybe not even that full year, and you're just like, this was the wrong path. I need to get out of here. What do you do in those moments? How do you course correct, or do you go with it?
I just quit.
You quit.
It was a really liberating realization, and I think I first had it when I was probably about 16, that I could quit things I didn't like doing, and that the world would not come to an end, that my parents would not hate me, that I would not be a bad person, that it was okay just to walk away. And so I don't quit many things, but when I do, it feels great.
I think it's one thing to push yourself in new directions, and it's an entirely different thing to force yourself to be somebody you're not. And you know the difference. You all know the difference when you're stretching yourself and it feels exciting. It may feel scary, but it feels exciting. And when you're forcing yourself and it doesn't feel authentic. So as soon as I feel inauthentic, as soon as I just feel, this isn't right, I quit.
Yeah. I also, just like thinking about my own life, like I knew that architecture was not the right thing for me, but I wanted so badly to just like finish it and just like prove to myself and like this, I don't know, imaginary thing that I could like do it. But what's amazing is looking back, that led me, and that experience and those people led me to a whole other direction that I never would have experienced had I not finished it. And then had I not gotten so burnt out and said, F you, and gone to France to go farming, and then met other people, and then, got into brand. It's like all of these, like, what's that Steve Jobs quote? It was like, all the connections looking back make sense, and whatever, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I think that like just kind of being okay with all of those missteps, because it all works out.
What about, I'm sure, okay, so when you're doing something new, even if it's a misstep, if it's a step that feels like it's in the right direction, there's often that crisis of confidence, or that feeling of that sort of imposter feeling, which I hated in Sheryl Sandberg's book that she wrote about that, because I'm like, you went to Stanford. Yeah. Like, what kind of imposter complex do you have? Yeah. What about the rest of us?
And Harvard.
Yeah, and Harvard. That's right. That's right. You have multiple degrees. So that proves nothing to me. But I think that that sort of crisis of confidence of like, can I do this? Is something that many of us experience. How do you get through that when you're doing something so new and reinventing yourself?
So I have sort of two things I say to myself, and one is just a friend of mine said it one day. He was a strategist at the Barbarian Group, and then he decided to learn to code. And the question he asked himself was, how hard can it be? and like that's frequently, we're remodeling our kitchen. I'm going to tear out some drywall. How hard can it be? We're going to get we're going to move everything around. Plumbing will be involved. How hard can it be? Hard enough that you should hire a plumber. But the other, so that's sort of the first thing that kind of talks me out of the imposter thing. Like everyone has to figure it out the first time. I'll just be the next person who figures it out the first time. The second thing that I always think about is, and it's from The West Wing, so I'm that nerd. Yes, I do have the West Wing weekly pin. If you want to do this with me, we can do that. But anyway, there's a line that Leo McGarry says to Josh. And it's after Josh has been shot and he's having PTSD and whatever. And he says, act as if you have faith and faith shall be given to you. In other words, fake it till you make it. And that is like the thing that I say to myself over and over again.
I completely agree with that. And I find the fake it till you make it thing, like I try and take it even one step further by backing myself into a corner as much as possible so that I have no choice but to do it until I'm doing it. Like I like to give myself absolutely, if I'm like, I definitely can't do this thing, I want to put myself in a situation where if I don't do that thing, I'm gonna die or go bankrupt. Like it has to happen. Because like as soon as you're doing it, you're in that situation and you just start doing it and you watch yourself and then you can't say I'm not doing it because you're watching yourself do it. So when I think I want to do something, I try and put myself into as much of a difficult situation where that's the only escape that I can. And one of the ways that I do that the most is by talking a big game when it's not legit yet, because people will believe you. And then you have to make it real if you have integrity.
That's bold.
Which I want to hold on to, so usually it makes me pull it off.
That's awesome. I also think, just adding to that, because fake it till you make it was the first thing that actually came to my mind, but like if you read any autobiography, like every single successful person feels like a failure at some point, or has been told that they, or has been fired, or told that they couldn't do something. I mean, it's amazing, these stories of, the most successful, right? And so, I don't know. I mean, I think it's like knowing that you're human and like self-love and just being kind to yourself. Like, we're all human. We're all human beings. Like, just be kind to yourself. I don't know.
Yeah, there's also like, everybody's had a far worse job than you have right now, even if you don't have a job. You've had a job that was worse than not having a job. And I think that I got fired from a grocery store, and it was a small chain in the Northwest called Hagen's. And they literally told me when they fired me, you're just not Hagen's material. And I actually laughed at the guy. Like, I thought that was the funniest thing I had ever heard in my life. And I was like, oh no, doors are closing all around me. And I just thought, okay, that's fine. Like, if I can get fired from a grocery store but still do, like, basically whatever I want, which is what I do now at 40 years old, then it's all worked out just fine.
I think it's interesting to fake it till you make it, because I actually have a different tactic. And maybe it comes from being at the place of my career that I'm at right now, but I think actually honesty, when you're in a crisis of confidence, to be honest about that. And I've been doing that here at SYP. I've never done this before. I know I have a lot of skills and I can bring a lot to the table, but I actually have never gone through this particular process. And it's amazing the help that gets offered to you, and also just being vulnerable like that. People then also open up and they are vulnerable, and you also find that you are stronger than you think you are by doing that. You sort of put your fear on the table and say, all right, good. Let's just let it sit there.
I think a lot of people struggle to be vulnerable about their ideal vision of what they want to be.
Yeah.
So being transparent, like when you're talking a big game, being transparent about the struggles of that, but also being willing to say, I want to do this crazy idea and I am doing it, and that's how I'm spending my time, because it can be embarrassing to be like, yeah, I'm spending 20 hours a week on the side trying to make this weird concept work. Are you embarrassed for me, or do you support me? But it gets you into a place where people actually will provide you with support, because most of the time people are excited about your big vision and they think it's cool when people have ideas.
That feels like such a nice reframe of the idea of it being bad to not know what you're doing, to actually, if we were all more open about, I'm actually trying to do what I don't know, and I want your help. Like that changes it from a oh, this person doesn't know what they're doing, they're trying to fake it, to a growth mindset. And allowing us all to be in that growth mindset all the time.
Exactly.
So one last question, and then I would love to open it up to the group. It's hard to, as we think about designing our futures, you can't help but also think about designing the future the world needs. And I'm curious to kind of end there, getting outside yourselves. What type of future are you trying to design in the world right now? Or what type of future do you want to design in the world? Farrah?
So much, but we need, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, we need more women leaders. We need more women as world leaders, period.
Boom. Mic drop.
And I think we're done for the evening, so feel free to get some wine.
Yeah, totally. And I actually just bringing it back, I do think the world is a reflection of who you are inside as well. So I do think like doing the work internally is going to be reflected and mirrored back to you. So I think that's really important. I also think that people, I mean, just like the obvious things, like people need to, women need, especially since we're at a she says, women need to stop competing with each other. We need to raise each other up. We need to support each other and realize that we're all kind of in this together. And yeah, I think that's super key to like our growth in the world. But also through creativity, I think we can really change the world. So, yeah.
I think I can at least speak for myself when I say the fact that my path in a career so far has been so nebulous and meandering and has allowed me to sort of like redesign a number of times is a result of a lot of privileges that I've had. And I think the world that we need is one in which careers can be shaped to individuals rather than shaped to antiquated ideas of how companies should be run that aren't even relevant for companies now and are holding not only companies' economic productivity back, but also individuals' potential back. So the vision that I'm trying to build toward is a world where each individual's potential in the workforce is matched to what their own potential is rather than to what kind of staid, structured roles they can manage to grab hold of based on the sort of privileges and access that they already have getting started.
I think that the thing I'm spending a lot of time thinking about and asking a lot of strangers for help about right now is a couple of things. As a qualitative researcher, the watchword has been empathy for almost my entire career, and I have developed concerns about the idea of empathy. And it's possible I wrote something recently with the title, Empathy is Bullshit. And it's not that it's bad, right? But it's just that it isn't scalable. I can have empathy one-on-one, but it's hard for me to have empathy for whole groups of people without it turning tribal and becoming actually pretty counterproductive and almost weaponizing empathy. And I think you see startups who've bought into the kind of nudge psychology idea, who are like optimizing people to do things because they think they know best. And that's, maybe they're wrong. I think there's a lot of things happening in sort of the world of politics and development and journalism, for that matter, that comes from a place of privilege and supremacy that no one's actually gone and met the audience. They haven't actually tried to take perspective from the point of view of the people they're trying to reach. And so there's a lot of judgment that's happening there. And so I've started to use a seemingly tamer word, but I think it's a much harder thing to do, and it's kindness. And so I'm doing a lot of thinking about that and what that means in political spaces as opposed to more kind of commercial spaces. And I don't know what that looks like yet. But it's the thing that I'm kind of grappling with the most. And I think part of it is that it's very easy for me to like helicopter into people's lives for a few hours or a day and think that I know everything about them, or I know enough about them to design for them. And I'm probably wrong about that. And so I'm trying to think about new methods and new approaches and new partnerships for doing that better.
I love that. It's so fabulous. So let's open it up. Questions. There's a question in the back.
Question. We talk about reinvention, which is really kind of, for me, sounds market-driven, as opposed to evolution, which is more human. And I was wondering, you guys all talked about reinvention, but how you evolve in your career as a person.
I'll hit. When I was about 22, I read a book that was really formative for me. It was called Composing a Life. And why it was so formative is because it had this concept, and I used it in my 5 words. You stumped me with the 5 words. But it had this concept of improvisation in your career, that essentially you discover your path as it unfolds before you versus having a vision predefined. And so part of, if you, I know Lisa, you do improv. If you do improv, you know that it's these contextual, you're sort of responding to the contextual and to your own evolution. So that's been my path, as I've just evolved and been curious about different areas. And, I think there's also the notion that, we're going to go in new directions, but we're also going to be redirected by technology, by different demands, changing things. So it's this blend of those things, but it's really about being improvisational through your...
And it seems like it would be much more satisfying.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think there's a piece of that which is also, when we think about reinvention or career shifts where we're moving into a new field, I mean, even I have just said you sometimes have to shed something that has lost value to you in that moment. I actually think you sort of are shedding your active participation in that thing, but everything you've done is a part of you. And I think the most valuable thing that anyone brings to their work is the cumulative perspective they've built up from all the stuff they've done so far. And we've seen the studies that more diversity of perspective in any team leads to better results. So when I think about that evolution, I think of kind of the thing that makes me feel okay about shedding something that I'm no longer actively doing is that it's kind of part of the portfolio of perspective that I've built. And it's adding value to me in ways that are maybe not immediately apparent, but when I'm kind of rolling things around in my head, it's knocking against that. So it's still part of my growth.
Other questions? There's one here.
There's sort of been no mention of money. And I think women's relationship with money is huge. Especially when you talk about reinvention, you talk about the idea of independence, financially independent. I mean, Virginia Woolf, the whole concept of a room of one's own. It's sort of like, in order to do that, you need the space, and and I think women do think about money different than men do, and we start to plan and worry and what's going to happen, and so I'm just curious what your thoughts are about money and finances, and how that plays into your idea of reinvention and your identity, and your identity of success too.
Yeah. So I'll be the real talk. Like, I am always a year behind on my taxes, and partly that's because I made some, not always, the last 3 years I've been behind on my taxes, and there were 2 things about it. One was it was a product of a business decision I made, and one that I just didn't know what I didn't know, and I hired someone full time to work for me, which I don't regret. She was amazing. In the end, the business sort of shifted, and she, there wasn't enough work for her to do, and she now happily lives in Portland, but where I'm from. So hey, she won. But it had some lasting effects on my sort of business finances. My personal finances are more or less okay, but it's just this constant like thing hanging around you of like, I mean, there is not really a week that goes by that I don't have some sort of passing negative fantasy of like, a van is going to pull up and some guys in suits are going to put me in the van and take me away. And that has been probably the biggest trauma of being an independent operator and a small business owner. That said, what I discovered from talking to people like Jane Barrett, who used to run McGarry Bowen and now has her finance startup Goldbean, is like, I'm not alone. I'm in no way alone. The IRS does not blink when we start talking about, you know, someone issued a bad 1099 for a consultant and whatever, like a million terrible things happen, and I imagine the van pulling up and the guys in the suits. But the IRS is fine, like everyone's fine. Everyone's on an installment plan, it's gonna be fine. I think the thing that I come back to is, if I were playing it perfectly safe, I wouldn't be able to do any of these other things. So I'm just going to have to accept that sometimes I stumble and I'm going to be late on something, and I'm going to have to sign up for the payment plan with the IRS. The flip side of that has also been a realization that, and I'll do another movie quote. I think it's from Citizen Kane, and his lawyer friend says something like, "Making money is no trick. Doing what you love and making money, now there's a trick." So like making money is not hard. So part of what I've had to do is accept that a few times a year I'm going to have to do projects I'm not thrilled about, but I can do. I can do them in my sleep. And this person needs me, or this business needs someone like me to fill this need, and they will pay me for the trouble, and then I can pay the IRS and breathe a little more easily, right? And so those things I've just sort of accepted, knowing that like the light at the end of the tunnel is coming. This year will be the year that all of that gets sorted out, and otherwise everything's going to be okay. And so sometimes it's white knuckling it, but the rest of the time it's probably fine. But I think part of it is convincing yourself you are not a bad person because you were late on a credit card payment or a student loan payment, or you didn't have all the money together to pay your IRS bill in April. It's fine. The universe still, you know, still expands, and the Earth still rotates. It will be fine. And I think that to me is the thing that I've spent a lot of time now with people I mentor, being really honest about how much money I've made in past jobs, how much money I think they should ask for, how much money I make now, where I'm struggling and where I'm not, and just because I think women in particular hold themselves to very high standards about risk-taking and money, that men, especially men whose parents are willing to pay for things, don't experience. And spending a lot of time in startup land, there's a lot of dudes with trust funds who are doing startups, so they don't feel that same terror that you might feel if you don't have that. So that's my answer.
I think there's also, so I think about the financial piece and how tremendously disparate people's experience of that can be starting out. Like somebody who has the security financially, you can go a long way by spending money. That's the classic, I think it's a classic comedy bit where a comedian introduces himself and says, "I'm gonna teach you how to make $1 million," and then he puts the mic to the side and says, "First you get $1 million." And then he keeps talking. It's the secret to startups. But I think there's two types of resources that I think about cashing in. And one of them is money, but the other one is credibility. Yeah. And if you can't necessarily build finances, a lot of times you can build credibility. And usually you have to cash in some of both of those things or a lot of one of those things to get access to the other side, which is doing whatever you want. So when I am running low on cash, a lot of times you use some of that credibility to get the gig where it's just the thing that you can do, that you're good at. Or, maybe it's taking a job as a waiter while you build your company so that you have the money thing on lock and you can build the credibility based on the company. If getting credibility is really well aligned to doing whatever you want, that's lucky for you. Maybe you're an artist and everyone loves every painting that you do. Yay, that's really unusual. Usually you have to trade some in to get access to the stuff you need to then build more credibility back up. So you risk either money or credibility or both. But I try and kind of do that balance sheet in my head on a regular basis. And if I'm too low financially, I got to check my credibility level and make sure I'm going to still be able to swoop in and make some money if I get into a crisis situation, or sort of vice versa.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. I'm gonna go a little woo on you, but I feel like there's also an abundant mindset, and having an abundant mindset is incredibly important. I think half the world, if not most of the world, lives in this like lack mindset, always focusing on what you don't have, what you can't do, what you won't do, and I truly believe that my success in life has come from knowing that I live in an abundant world. And I attract that into my life. And it's sort of also by sort of what of the other things that we were talking about in terms of following your joy. Like things that make you happy, you know, you should follow and the money will follow. Like it will happen. Because you're open, because you believe in yourself, and I truly believe that, and I've been proven right in that as well.
On the total opposite end of that, I'll say I'm good friends with Gloria Steinem's editor from Miss Magazine, who's gone on to do lots of other things, and she says the number one thing she tells her interns is go after the money, like make some money. And then figure out what you want. Because there's such injustice around money. And sometimes, even if you have a great mindset, you need the money. So I've really started to talk to young people I work with about that. I'm like, you don't have to have the perfect nonprofit job that is making you feel good. You don't have to have the startup job that is paying you pennies. You can take that finance job and be your full self there, make your money, and then go do what you love.
Yeah, I was going to add that having that base makes all the difference. And for me, I mean, I started my career in the restaurant business, which, you know, newsflash, you don't make a lot of money doing that. But I lived so far below my means. I mean, there was like 5 of us to an apartment. And I continue to live, I still live well below my means, but part of that is to really make sure I have that solid foundation, which is security, which makes you take the risks.
In principle, women do need more security than
men
do.
Exactly.
I mean, it's part of our nurturing kind of basis. And however that security is, it may form itself in different ways, but we do live in a commerce kind of environment.
And ask for it. I mean, I went to an all-girls school. I grew up thinking women ruled the world. I like have no concept of like, no, seriously. Like I'm like, what? Men get paid like more, and women get paid less. Like, just ask for it. Like, own it. I don't know. Like you deserve it.
Another question, yeah.
Well, I have 2, and one might be more simple than the other, so you can just choose. So one is, like, it's great to be like working towards your goals, but something that I'm grappling with now is like, what are my goals? Like 10 years into my career, I've had the same position 3 times. Even after going to grad school, I landed in the same thing I was trying not to do. So my frustration is high right now. But I'm like, I think I'm so in the like aware of like what I don't want to do that it's hard to know what I do. You know, like anyway. So setting goals is a struggle because it's like first you have to figure out what the F you actually are trying to go for. On a completely different note, and I don't quite know my questions here, but it's just about us being women and reproducing and careers, and like there's a point where you have to kind of just like do the whole thing, you know, if you want to have kids, right? And like that kind of, you know, just sort of like how to balance that, right? Like that whole balance, which I think is an ever ongoing thing. I don't know if any of you 4 have kids. I don't have kids yet, but like being in my 30s, I think about that, and it's like I don't feel like my professional career is where it's at, where I want it to be at to have kids, but like the biological clock is ticking, right? So it's shit or get off the pot situation kind of thing. So, you know, anyway, sorry, I'm so eloquent, really lovely. But those are my 2 questions / ideas, I guess, I want to put out there.
Super super curious to hear about the second one. Because I think the shit has landed in the pot. But let's start with the first question about goals and being true to your goals when you feel like you keep landing in the same place.
I think a lot of people, maybe women in particular, because as girls we're taught risk aversion and boys not so much with risk aversion. We're taught to play it safe as girls in American culture and maybe around the world. So I think we suffer from like goal perfectionism a lot of the time, where we're looking for the super goal, the ultimate goal, kind of the same way that we want like the most perfect nonprofit job, but somehow it's going to be lucrative right out of college. And goals also should be changing as frequently as everything else. And you're definitely going to be super horribly ultra wrong about what your goals are every like 2 years. I definitely have been way more frequently than that. So I think constantly adjusting your goals and setting goals that are extremely feasible is the right type of goal setting if things seem insurmountable. Because if your goals list is too perfect, you can't achieve it because there is no perfection. So one thing that I do with goal setting to try and search for the super goal is set really approachable little stuff and kind of do the like 1 day, 1 week, 3 months. And if I can't come up with the 6 months, then my goal is like at the end of 3 months, have a new 3-month goal, then 6 months, 3 plus 3, we're fine. Like, creep into it. It's an iterative thing because I never set a goal to do the thing that I'm doing now X years ago, but I did set mini goals along the way that have led me in an okay direction I feel good about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're always proven wrong. Like, like something happens that you can't control. Like, we're all control freaks. Like, you can't control it, and you can control it. So, I mean, you definitely can control it, and goal setting is really good. And I do a lot of that, and I like, vision board, and I have my, I've done many things in my life. Like, I've written exactly what I want my ideal job to feel like in like emotions, right? And I think I had something like, I walk into my new job and everyone greets me with a smile, and I feel so valuable, and like
then they shower money on
you. Yeah, and it's like, and I'm making X amount, and and actually like writing that was really helpful because I believed it, and I put it away, and then like 2 years later, I looked at it and I was like, holy, like, oh my God, I did this, like So I think that it's not necessarily linear. It's not necessarily perfectionism and control that does it. It's like the feeling of it,
I love that. I love it, taking it to an emotional place.
Yeah.
As opposed to these practical goals.
Yeah. Because actually, I feel really bad if I don't. Like if I set goals being like, you should exercise 3 times a week, like for 3 months, I'd be like hating myself because I'd be like, oh my God, I'm not doing it. Like, you know what I mean? Or like something's changing, or I don't know. It's like you can start getting down on yourself,
It's like you rip out the old to-do lists after the week has passed. If you didn't check it off, you just rip it out and throw it away. It's fine.
It's fine, yeah.
If it makes the next week, okay, maybe it's priority.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I think a lot about is probably because it was a feature of many lectures when I was a child, is the idea of privileges come with responsibilities. So if you want to do a thing and that sounds like fun, what are the sacrifices you're going to have to make in order for that to happen? And I think one of the most damaging phrases in the Western world is have it all. Or for that matter, work-life balance. Like both of those are just, whether you have kids or not, it's bullshit. And it's an unreasonable standard to hold yourself to. It is also a weirdly privileged idea that you could somehow strike a balance between work and life, that you would always have everything in perfect equilibrium requires staff. The phrase, you have the same number of hours in the day as Beyonce, is a lie. She has staff. So that is not true. Yeah, exactly. So
in tech, we call that scaling yourself.
Yes, exactly. There's a media post the other day about the founder doesn't mow the lawn, and I was like, in my household, yes, he does. But She's not getting out of that task. Are you kidding me?
She's having one child, she's having two.
Oh, and yeah, so she'll have 3 now. And they will probably all each will have their own nanny. It'll be amazing.
Yes, they will.
Yes, they will. and so that's great if you can afford that. If that's the level you're playing at, then more power to you. If you are like anybody else in the universe, you need to do yourself the incredible favor of not holding yourself to those standards. The other thing that I do this with clients a lot, okay, you want to do X, what are you going to give up? If you want to do this, you want to develop a new product, a new line of business, a new service, a new customer segment, who are you jettisoning? Because you actually do not have infinite resources. You have to make decisions. What are you going to sacrifice so that you can achieve this thing? And then the third thing I think about is like ground cover and air cover. Like, who's going to protect me while I do this risky thing? Like, do I have mentors who are going to stand up for me? Is my partner going to help out because I'm now teaching at night, and so he's the one who's got to come home to let the dog out, like, or he's got to fend for himself for grocery shopping 3 days a week, or whatever, you know, or he's got to take care of all this stuff that I can't take care of because I'm now working 12 hours in the day. That is where like Sheryl Sanders' advice of like whoever your partner is probably the most important career decision you'll ever make. I endorse that, and I made a good bet, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. But then the other side is ground cover. Who's going to help you? Who can you enlist to help you get to the thing that you want? And so some of it is about that. Then I think the other side on the goal setting thing is also a little bit about check your own ego. Like, are you really the right person to do that? Are you really in a position to dent that part of the universe or make a difference there? Are you the right vehicle for that idea? Or does it just sound nice to you? Does it make you feel good about yourself to imagine yourself doing that thing? And I've imagined myself as a pretty princess in lots of places that I have no business being a pretty princess. So a lot of it is like, get back to really what is it that I know how to do genuinely? What can I genuinely learn how to do quickly? What will make me feel a sense of purpose? And I will trust that that will bring me joy, because not everything brings me joy, even though I feel motivated to do it. But I'm with everybody else on like writing things down, revisiting those lists. Look back at what you wrote in your journal 10 years ago. Do you still feel an affinity for that? If you do, then you were probably on the right track then, and you may have more opportunity now to actually make that thing happen.
Let's end on that note. Thank you all. Let's take the reproductive question over drinks.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for coming. Please stay to have some drinks, to mingle a little bit, and hope to see you here again.